it's Mangino. Welcome to the Mangino Talks Pittsburgh podcast. I've been a radio talk show host now for half of my life, and nearly half of that here in Pittsburgh on KDKA. And so on my podcast, we talk about everything that matters to us all, from current events to Pittsburgh history, social issues to sports, politics to practical day-to-day life. And it doesn't get much more practical than on what we each make when it comes to going out to work every day. And one of the debates that's taking place right now in Harrisburg is the issue of minimum wage. It has been an ongoing battle about raising the minimum wage all the way back to when we raised it nearly 13 years ago to $7.25 an hour. There have been pushes since then to raise it, most recently back around 19, when the proposal was to increase it to around $9.50 an hour. Didn't go anywhere. We still sit at $7.25 an hour, the same as the national minimum wage. There are 30 states around the country that have a minimum wage that is higher than our own. And the question then comes up, is it time for Pennsylvania to raise its minimum wage? Some argue that, well, if we keep the minimum wage low, the way that it is right now, then we're going to attract business to come here. I don't know who is going to say, you know what, I'm looking for a place to open up shop, and I want to do it where I can pay people $7.25 an hour. There are already all these other states that say, no, I'm going to go ahead and open up this really nice manufacturing facility here because I'll get the really cheap labor. Nobody's doing that. Nobody's going to decide to move to Pennsylvania with their industry to pay employees minimum wage, $7.25, $7.50, $8 an hour. If you're talking about good manufacturing jobs, they're paying way beyond that already. $25, $30, $35 an hour for the more high-tech advanced jobs. And besides, where can you find somebody who's willing to work for less than $15 an hour anyway right now? How many of you just driving down the road, you see the signs? You want a fried chicken? $12, $13 an hour. You want to put lunch meat inside a couple pieces of bread? You're looking at $12, $13, $14 an hour. You want to work at a store, either as a cashier for people who are pumping the gas and getting some snacks or making somebody's to-go order? You're looking at $15, $16, $17 an hour for these jobs. So when it comes to raising the minimum wage, there are some questions that need to be asked. Is there a practical reason for it, or is it support a lot about political posturing? And then is the opposition to this idea of raising the minimum wage nothing more than political posturing there too? It is interesting. House Bill 1500 is what we're talking about. It was sponsored by Representative Jason Dawkins out of Philadelphia. It's gotten its opposition. Senate Majority Leader Joe Pittman out of Indiana, he's a Republican, and he says what the House narrowly passed by, 2 votes, doesn't have much of a chance in the Senate, and that $15 an hour is not a practical number. The thoughts on the pro side is, well, there are people out there who are working for far less, and they can't afford to support themselves and their children on minimum wage. And so as a result of that, we need a higher wage for minimum wage. Now, the people who are making minimum wage anywhere close to $7.25 an hour, you're talking about people who have no skills, no real demonstrable abilities, no real discernible education, no training. That's why they're given this entry-level position. Who are the people who are most often going to be paid these minimum wages? High schoolers that are just learning to be workers. They have nothing more to offer than, yes, I showed up, maybe on time. The idea that there are people who are trying to support themselves and renting apartments, raising children, and doing so at $7.25 an hour is just absolutely absurd. It's not happening. And if you are an adult and you're 25, 30 years old, and you see yourself as perpetually employed at jobs that are paying well below even what they want minimum wage to be, Don't those individuals have to ask themselves at what point, why am I being paid this? What am I bringing to the table or not bringing to the table that I just can't convince my boss that I'm worth more than $7, $8, $9, $10, $11 an hour? How did I make it to 30, 35 years of age and I can't support myself and make a wage that's worthy of more pay than what's being offered? There are a lot of people that need to be asking themselves that, and there are proponents of raising the minimum wage who make the argument that this is about living standards and raising those living standards. They need to be asking themselves how seriously they take even themselves in this process. Let me give you a couple of examples here. In the debate on the House floor, Republican lawmakers warned that the raise would result in tens of thousands of lost jobs, $150 million in lost wages, and more than $1 billion in lost profits for family-owned businesses. Now, apparently, Republican Torrin Ecker out of Adams County didn't get the memo because he says from the floor in debate, as it stands today, nearly 98% of Pennsylvanians earn a wage higher than minimum wage. Okay. Well, if that's the case, then you're not going to see massive job losses, right? Because they're already making more than that. We just talked about how it's difficult to find a position that's paying less than $15 an hour right now to do anything. I mean, if you can put a can of vegetables on a shelf and know enough to make sure that the label faces outward, you can make $15 an hour. If you can put a box of cereal on a shelf and know which side faces out, you can make $15 an hour. So the idea that people aren't able to make these wages is just ridiculous. And the idea that it's going to have some real detrimental impact to employers isn't making a whole lot of sense either. It just doesn't. If 98% of Pennsylvanians earn a wage higher than minimum wage. He also goes on to say that it's a misconception that they're single parents raising children or individuals coming from low socioeconomic households. In reality, 93% of these employees have 0 children, and a considerable amount of minimum wage earners are from middle and upper class families. How is that? Because they're the kids. They're high school students. They're just trying to figure out how to work. And as they go into the workforce, they're getting paid the same rates. It's as simple as that. So these arguments that are being made, either for or against, not so much about real data, it's more about political posturing. Now, I understand why Democrats are posturing the way that they are. They're trying to convince people that they're giving them something that they don't already have. They already have the jobs that are paying these wages. They're just saying, hey, look at us. We're going to pass a law that is going to mandate the businesses do what they're already doing anyway. Aren't we wonderful, right? And then on the flip side, Republicans are taking the opposite view of this and saying, no, we don't want to do this, and then trying to make the argument that it's going to be bad for businesses and bad for consumers. It's not going to be bad for either one of them. Think about this. If the labor is already being paid $15 an hour, and by and large it is, then how does making the minimum wage $15 an hour negatively impact you at the store? It doesn't. The prices are already baked in because the wages are already being paid. Companies are already addressing this issue when it comes to the costs. What they're finding out is that even though the market has raised the wages as high as they have, businesses are still struggling because the real market to entice people back to work actually compels the wage to be even higher. According to some recent statistics, you have a lot of people who are not working right now in America because it's too expensive to work. It's just too expensive. You look at commute costs, you look at childcare costs, and then people ask themselves, by the time I look at, figure out all my costs for going to work, and then I go to work and I get paid, how much is going out just so I can have the ability to go work? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And besides, there's care that I have to provide to others within my family, parents, grandparents. And what I can go earn isn't greater than what I could pay somebody else to take care of these responsibilities for me. So I might as well stay where I am. And considering the wages have been on the increase for the past 3 years, and they have been, families also have decided that, you know what, since the one person in the family is making more money, I don't need to go and get that job. The other person working is doing sufficiently. Or I may go and work a part-time job instead. It's happening a lot. It's also happening a lot to where people are saying, before I had to have a full-time job and a part-time job, and now with the wages being higher, I'm okay with just having a full-time job and then a part-time job on top of that. Not for everyone. I know a lot of people who are in a situation to where they're still working multiple jobs. But then there are many others that are not in that situation. What's interesting about this proposal is not just raising the minimum wage. By the way, it would go to $11 an hour next year, $13 an hour in 25, and then $15 an hour in 2026. What's also included in this is an annual cost of living increase that would be pegged to the consumer price index. So every year, those who would be paid minimum wage would see an increase every single year. Now, the problem that I have with that is that there are a lot of people who work jobs that are making more than minimum wage, and they don't see their wages going up to the cost of living index or the consumer price index every single year. It's not happening for them. So why should the minimum wage go up accordingly? In fact, one Democrat, Senator Wayne Fontana from Allegheny County here, says that when it comes to the provision of guaranteed cost of living increases tied to the consumer price index, that could be the stopper, that he inserted something in the legislation that could be the ultimate killer in this. Nonetheless, he said it would be hard to vote against a bill that included an annual cost of living increase. No, it would not be. In fact, not having the cost of living increase automatic would be easier to have this bill pass, because there's going to be a lot of pressure that will be put on Republicans to say, no, individuals do not get a guaranteed raise every single year, that somehow this year's kids becoming 16 years old and going into the workforce are somehow guaranteed that they're going to be paid more than the kids who worked the same job last year. I think it can be a definite bill killer. Senator Jarret Coleman, Republican out of Lehigh, said an increase would lead to higher prices for consumers. And I don't see that happening. We talked about that. He says that these employers would be forced to recoup the extra wages being paid to workers. And they're already doing that. We're already experiencing that. So just officially raising it to a wage that everybody's paying already, that's not going to happen. He does favor giving counties the authority to set minimum wages within their borders, saying that the cost of living varies greatly from cities like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh to rural counties in other parts of the state. And I'm with him on that if you're going to have a state minimum wage, then having the entire state be paid a minimum based upon what we perceive to be the minimum value for work in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh is not reasonable. Now, Philadelphia may have a minimum wage of $15, $16, $18 an hour, but do you need that minimum wage in Clarion? Is that the minimum wage that you need in Greene County, in Fayette County? I would argue that you don't. And putting that unnecessary financial burden on those businesses in those rural areas could easily lead to job killers and ultimately people that you're trying to help in this process. By ensuring that people get more money, you then increase the number of people who are unemployed. Because although, as I said earlier, it's difficult to find jobs that are paying less than $15 an hour, especially when you're in the Pittsburgh area, it's really difficult. But if you drive an hour and a half outside of Pittsburgh, will you find jobs paying less? No doubt, because the cost of living is ultimately less. Makes sense to me. Representative Ronnie Green, a Democrat out of Philadelphia, said that the bill is a work in progress and that ultimately their true goal now is to get to $18 an hour. 18. It wasn't that long ago when the fight was for $15 an hour. And Ronnie Green says, can we accept anything lower than what is being proposed here today? And the answer is never. Well, let me say this. That is foolish talk. Because if the minimum wage right now is $7.25, and you can negotiate to 10 or 11, maybe even 12 across the entire state, do you then not pass the legislation to get to 12 to benefit some? Or you say, nope, because I can't get to 15, I'm voting no completely on this. And then denying the potential for wage increases to some people that you claim to be supporting. Representative Valerie Gatos, Republican from Allegheny County here, said that ultimately this is an assault on small businesses and the restaurant industry. Government should not be allowed to fix wages. Let the free market take care of the industry. And when you look at wages right now, they are clearly going up, and they're not going up because of anything the government has done in mandating that wages be increased. Absolutely nothing. So as I look at this, I'm left with Democrats want to increase the minimum wage to make themselves look good in doing nothing but appearance's sake. They're not really going to have an impact on any real numbers of people, but it will look like they're doing something. And then from the Republican standpoint, I don't understand this dig your heels in opposition outside of just being opposed for being opposed sake. I mean, that you just feel as though there are some that are in this spot because that's where they are and that's where they want to be. Because if all of your constituent businesses are already paying closer to $15 an hour, if not $15 an hour, then raising it will do them no harm. If all of your consumers within your districts are already shopping at businesses that are paying $15 an hour to all of their employees, then there isn't going to be a negative impact on the consumers because they're already experiencing the raise. Making it official will do nothing. But why is it that Republicans are opposed when there will be no real practical negative impact? And why are Democrats in favor of this when there will be very little, if any, practical impact? Perception. Simple as that. Because we live in a society right now where thinking at least this much, and we've been talking about this topic for 15, 20 minutes, and have come to the realization that a minimum wage increase at this level isn't going to do all that much for anybody, to the good or to the bad. But when you just go with feelings and knee-jerk reactions, then Republicans are going to have some explaining to do, and they're going to have to do it to people who otherwise don't want to hear the facts laid out as I just explained them. And then Democrats, if they don't move forward hard on this, they're going to be dealing with the same thing, trying to explain how it is that they didn't get this thing forward, even though it's not going to change anybody's lot in life. The part that bothers me the most is the idea of pegging it to cost of living and giving guaranteed raises every single year when you have people who are working otherwise that are above that are not going to be getting those guaranteed raises. Now, there will be a group of people who will benefit from this. They will be those that are part of organized labor, especially those that are tied into governments, that will see a bargaining position that will greatly empower them. Kind of like what Allegheny County is facing now that County Council has voted to override the county executive's veto of raising the minimum wage to $18 an hour plus for county workers. There aren't going to be a lot of people who are going to benefit from that immediately by having wages go from below 18 to 18. But it's going to put the unions that will be negotiating their contracts with the next county executive in a much more powerful position to get even more money. And then you're talking about what will the impact be to taxpayers? How much more are they going to have to pay? And for the sake of intellectual honesty, we can't discuss this without recognizing that there are 1,600 jobs that are currently unfilled at the county. Why are they unfilled? Because they can't attract people to come work for the county. Why can they not do that? Because they don't pay enough. And so the real question that people have to ask themselves is, the 1,600 jobs that are currently unfilled, are they all providing valuable services back to the residents of Allegheny County? If so, then you're going to have to pay more to have those services provided to you through taxes, toward the wages, to attract the people necessary to work. People are not going to work for free. You can't expect them to either. On the flip side, the next administration may very well be looking at, do we actually need all of these people? Can we consolidate many of these positions? Can we allow some of them to just go away through attrition? But if it's determined that we need the services these 1,600 people can provide, expect to pay more in property taxes moving forward, because the wages are going to go up, not only for them, but for the other, 5,400 employees that are going to see a justification in their minds to ask for more money when their contracts are up. Minimum wage hikes across the state of Pennsylvania and right here in Allegheny County. You've been listening to the Mangino Talks podcast. Thank you very much for listening. Please be sure to click the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. And by the way, new episodes drop Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Pittsburgh time. For more on me and the show, be sure to visit manginotalks.com. If there's a topic you would like me to talk about or a guest that you would like me to have on, send me an email at mangino@manginotalks.com. Follow me on your favorite social media platform by using @ManginoTalks. And once you find me, please like, follow, subscribe, and share the pages with your friends and family. Thank you once again for listening to the Mangino Talks Pittsburgh podcast.